extended lockdowns across the country have pushed the working population back to the sanctity of their homes, emptying out buildings and offices. Work is now perceived as something people do rather than a place to go to. What does this signal for India's office real estate? How much will it get impacted not only with the second wave of the pandemic, but also the growing trend of work from anywhere? Let's unpack it with Vinod Rohira, CEO Mindspace Business Parks REIT. Mindspace declared its numbers recently and those have a story to tell. Also with us, Anshul Jain, MD India and South Asia, Cushman and Wakefield. Of course, we always rely on their report to look at the overall leasing trends in India office market. Welcome, gentlemen. Vinod, despite the lockdowns last year, you were able to report 12% increase in net operating income and make a dividend payout in both quarters since your listing. Do you believe your business will ride out the second wave just as steadily?
You know, what's really important, Manisha, is to understand who is our customer. 95% of our footprint is global GCCs, GICs, and global service providers of technology. If you look at their hiring in the last 6 months, especially in the last quarter and continuing in this quarter, it's grown humongously. So you're seeing them grow, you're seeing them increase their bandwidth of services and offerings, which has to translate back into the workspace. So their businesses are doing well, their profitability is at high, they're hiring resources. At some point in time, those resources have to sit on a desk and start working. So if you look at those three things, we know fundamentally you're on a very strong wicket. Obviously, the second wave is not going to help anyone, but it's very important to understand previous to the second wave, the footprint in the offices was less than 10%. So it's not that being in the offices got the wave up. Being at home and doing other things has got the wave up. So it's not really that the office is the place where you would catch COVID. And a lot of the global companies with the vaccinations progressing very, very aggressively are already wanting guys back to the workspace. And that trend is going to start flowing into India. Obviously, it's got deferred because of what we are facing, unfortunately, across the country.
Anshul, all right. So there's the confidence that, what you hear about future of work is probably not likely to play out in India. But if I look at the occupancies, there clearly has been some dip in both Mindspace and Embassy Office Park occupancies, about 5 to 7% lower than what they were last year. Your report says that net leasing has also fallen 43% year on year. Are you that confident, or do you feel that this time around maybe we should be careful about a few more things?
I think the pattern is likely to repeat itself, and what we saw last year, right? So last year, this time when the crisis hit, there was a lot of conjecture that it was based on the discussions that we were having with the client as to what the future of offices would look like. This year, we have a bit of data, not only how the markets behaved post the first wave of COVID, but also we've seen how the markets have behaved across the world post first and in some countries post the second wave of COVID, right? And people are willing to come back, they're wanting to come back. And of course, all the things that we said last year is still true, right? That when people come back, it won't be 100%. There'll be still a working population which will be working from home and so on and so forth. So yes, occupancy has dipped a bit across the board. And the prime reason for that is, a lot of companies have used, so the two segments of companies, one are large companies and then one are the smaller companies. The smaller companies have said, let's use this time, we're not going to the office, we might as well save the cost and give up that space. Some of the large companies have said that maybe it's a time for them to just look at their costs and rationalize it a bit, because most of the large companies in their pursuit of expansion has had, and rightfully so, kept maybe 10-15% buffer space with them as they kind of grew. And now that growth clearly in the short term took a bit of a hit. And of course, people don't know what would the exact headcount look like and exact designs look like post. So they say, okay, if we have a little bit of excess space, let's give it up. But let's renew the balance space. And therefore, while we all focus on the net absorption, which is the right number to focus because that's net new space being absorbed, an encouraging figure is gross absorption, which for the first quarter was about 12.5 million feet. 5% over the fourth quarter of 2020. And that basically indicated that a number of companies are still renewing their space. And when they're renewing their space, they're renewing it for the next kind of 3 or 5 years. So I think if you look at all that data, you still feel and compare it to what's happening around the world when the waves subside, we still feel very optimistic about the office market going forward post the waves.
All right, Vinod. So Vinod, let me ask you, what has changed? I'm sure that, all the corporate clients, because we hear of all the large tech majors looking at hybrid work models. In the new RFPs which are floating in the market, is there demand for shorter term leases, more flexible spaces, perhaps, lower rent escalations? Can you give us some flavor of what has changed?
Actually the scenario has not changed for any of those customers. It's very simple. If in a market like this, you're looking at growth and you're looking at either consolidation or a combination of consolidation and growth, you absolutely are clear of what you need. At that point in time, there is no point on these clients taking a 3-year view or a 5-year view because they're going to put in fresh capex in an environment like this. They're absolutely sure what they're doing. So in fact, you're finding clients asking for 15-year contracts now instead of 10-year contracts. We're negotiating 2-3 large contracts. All of them, the customers are asking you for 10 and 15 years. So the pattern of rent payment, the negotiation around escalations, all of that is really not changed at all. There is obviously the immediate guys who, like Anshul mentioned, some of them are surrendering off space in parts. Those guys don't have global mandates from their offices to sign the renewal, which is why they have no option but to terminate currently whatever was non-strategic space for them in the bargain. And they know and they tell us in 6-9 months, we will need this space back because we are hiring people. We'll come back to you. We don't have the mandate right now, so we can't really offer it. We can't take it.
Okay.
But having said that, they are seeing growth in the services and the need for people hiring is there. So that is going to translate to the workspace. Today, while you have the dominance of the second wave, until vaccinations don't take an aggressive posture, you can't bring your people back to the workspace. So by default, whether you like it or not, you will not bring them to your desk. But wanting to go back to the desk has always been there. Most clients are talking to us and saying, how do we work together on vaccinations? And we are working closely to set up vaccination centers across all our parks. Of course, it's a different matter that we need the vaccinations, but the infrastructure is already being set up as we speak because the clients want to engage and get their employees vaccinated at the earliest. After that, they know that workplace is where they want their employees back. Otherwise, they wouldn't even encourage or push the need for vaccination. So those trends are emerging really quickly.
Understood, Vinod. So you're saying that actually not much has changed. Then, Anshul, my question is that this entire, conversation around enterprise clients, enterprise for everybody's knowledge are large clients who take large spaces. Now they're demanding probably more flexible spaces, more flexible leases. Is that hyped? Or is it just that, a Mindspace or an Embassy, these are just developers at the top end of the market and they are seeing lesser pressure?
No, I think some of what you're saying, Manisha, we're seeing some early trends in that, right? Now, the trouble is when you're talking about SEZ type spaces, it's kind of harder for a tripartite transaction, flexible spaces, et cetera, and that's a bit more of a regulatory issue, I would say. But if you're talking about non-SEZ spaces, we are seeing more demand for flex. And how this is being solved is that usually the developer is then leasing space out to a flex office provider or a co-working provider who in turn is providing space to the same space to a corporate. Now, this is pretty much a similar deal which a developer may give directly to the to an end user, except that when the flexible guy comes in between, there are two things happening. One, they provide capex for fit out, which means that the corporate is not spending their own capex. And sometimes the flex operator might say, to the corporate that the corporate may not need 3-year transaction or may not be able to sign a 3-year deal right now. And they might say, we only want a 1-year transaction or 2-year transaction. Some of that happens, but then the flex guy is taking that risk because they are signing a 3-5-year lease with the landlord. So some of those models are emerging, which is really eases up the capital situation for the corporate and gives them a bit more flexibility. But then there are different kind of business models, right? And there are some businesses which are saying we want certainty of a 15-year lease, because we are running some heavy data-oriented work, which needs lots of servers.
So,
and
Anshul, sorry to, have limited time, so I'm going to kind of cut you short there. Let me ask you then, what is the biggest risk you foresee of office net demand returning to its peak of 2019? And how long will it take? If it will return at some point, when will it?
2019 is a big ask, and I think maybe 12 to 18 months. I'd say maybe the year 23 should be when we should get back. But also don't forget, once the world is vaccinated, and it's in India, it's a long way to go still. But once it's largely vaccinated, the confidence will return, and once confidence returns, we expect the office to bounce back very rapidly. Also, don't forget there'll be a lot of pent-up demand, right? So in the opening segment, I said a lot of people are giving up short-term space or are rationalizing space which they don't need right now. So there'll be a lot of pent-up demand once the confidence returns. So I think it's safe to bet that 2023 could be a big bounce back year.
2023 will reach the peak of 2019. That's not too far away if you look at from where we are standing here. Vinod, in your investor call, you mentioned that the dividend payout on Mindspace face value unit adds up to about 7% yield. So my question is, will you be able to maintain that going forward?
We've given the forward call on that as well, Manisha. We've said whatever we've said in our presentation, that we will track that and provide that information and give that return. What also I want to add is to what Anshul said. What's important is, even if it's flexi space, it's office space, which means clients are looking at office space. It's just that they don't have the confirmation by their managements to take long calls just now, but they want the workspace. So if they want the workspace, it will very soon move to permanent space, because they actually need the office space and it's not work from home. So that really is fundamentally very important to note, because they want the workspace. They're just going to take that call slower.
All right, I think we've got some of the key points in. Looks like office market will continue to remain resilient. Vinod Rohira and Anshul Jain, thank you so much for joining me.